Hello and welcome back to my channel, Talented Reads. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I did a reading vlog like a month back, and in that video I had showed what I was reading, and I made a comment that I am the type of reader that reads with more than one bookmark, and I got a couple of questions about it. Now, a lot goes into it actually before you even get to the bookmark point. So I thought I would make kind of just a whole video about how I plan my reading. A video in which I'm calling Reading for Obsessive Planners. We are coming into June, so I thought now would be a good time to kind of walk through the whole process. Now, with this comes a few disclaimers. So, one, what I'm showing today is nothing new. This is not something I just recently started doing, or even started doing when I created my channel. This I've been doing for a long time. It's actually kind of started when I was going through my master's program years ago. Just trying to balance work and a heavy school load and just general life stuff. My reading time was severely impacted with school, as I'm sure a lot of people understand. But I still wanted to make time, even if it was just a little bit, to read, because I knew it's what I wanted to do and it's what I like to do, and that's kind of my anxiety release, I guess. So I needed to kind of schedule in that time along with everything else. So, two, along with that goes, this is what works for me. I'm a tracker and a planner by nature. In fact, the farther out I can plan, the happier I feel. Just ask my CBBs. I enjoy planning the coming month. It helps me feel excited to read the stuff that I picked, and it helps me stay kind of engaged throughout the month. I've said this before in a video, but I'll say it again. If I'm left to kind of just be free, I will do nothing. So, again, I like planning. This is what works for me. If this is way too much for you, by all means, don't do any of it. And lastly, this planning, I'll say, is a bit kind of structured, but it's also flexible. So when I show you my process, I guarantee you'll be like, wow, this is a lot. And it's so rigid, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. But there have been multiple times where, I've swapped a book out, or sometimes I just don't feel like reading that night, which is perfectly fine, and I don't force it. And yeah, I think this will make a little more sense once we get into it. So let's get into it. So first things first, I pick my books. Now, I'm doing a lot of challenges this year and a lot of yearly challenges, which I knew I was going to try to spread them out through all the months, right? So at this point, I've kind of already picked the books for this month, which you'll see here. But, I try to kind of slot the books in a little bit throughout. Most of the challenges have prompts, so I kind of go, I'll divvy up the prompts, and I'm going to try to get through these ones in the first quarter, and then these ones for the second quarter, right? And then as we kind of go through the months, I'm kind of doing this sometimes even 3 or 4 months out, just, again, because it's what makes my planning heart happy. But let's just go through what I've got and kind of what I'm using that for, and then that might help you kind of understand my thought process as I pick my books. So I start with my highest priority and work my way down. So for me, my highest priority is the horror challenge that I'm doing. And the horror challenge is I pick 5 books to read each month for a certain subcategory in horror. So June is supernatural. So the books that I have picked for that are Nosferatu, Unburied Carol, Ring Shout, Night of the Mannequins, and Smithy. And let's spread these out a little bit. Good enough. All right. So I decided going into this year that I wanted to read more nonfiction. So I've been trying to pick a nonfiction book a month. So this month's nonfiction is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory. So I'm a member of NetGalley, which is where I get my ARCs from. And an ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copies, which is for a book coming out later in the year. So what I try to do when I get an ARC is I try to read the book like the month before the book is supposed to come out. So this month I'm reading Wake the Bones, and this book is set to come out in July. Next I have my new releases. So this month I have Dark Stars, which is a very cool horror anthology. I have Book Lovers and Black Tide. And all of these were released in May. Actually, at this point, I think Black Tide isn't out yet. I don't think it comes out until the 31st or something. So that one I don't physically have in my hands, but it's in my cart. So, up to this point, I've kind of chose these for, very specific reasons. So, I have the horror challenge, nonfiction, arcs, and new releases. But I am also kind of using these for other challenges that I have. So they're kind of a dual purpose. So the next 5 were specifically picked for the particular challenge. So the buzzword-a-thon, each month there's a buzzword, which is a word that you look for in the title of the book. So the buzzword for June is all. And I picked Into the Forest and all the way through. My friend actually lent this to me, and it's kind of like a true crime poetry collection. She said she went into like a rabbit hole researching all of the stuff, which makes me even more intrigued. For the 52 book challenge is the prompt with a book with a second person narrative. So I picked The Push, which I understand is kind of like a past and present narrative. So I'm kind of counting that as the second narrative, which they said was fine. For the 12 challenge, which is to read 12 books recommended by 12 friends, I'm picking a book recommended by Starla from Starla Enjoys. I will link their YouTube channel in the description box. And I am reading Razorblade Tears. And then I have The Hacienda and Breathless. These were the Book of the Month selections for May. I picked The Hacienda, and then I did an add-on, which you can do one, or I think up to 2 add-ons a month. But both of these are part of the selections for May, so I picked those. I know these 2 will count towards my Book of the Month reading challenge. I'm hoping The Push and Razorblade Tears will also count. I got them last year, so they might be too old to count for the challenge, but I guess we'll find out. And lastly, I kind of started this thing where I've been reading like 20 books a month for the first quarter, and I've kind of been able to keep up that. So now I kind of feel like I need to just continue the trend. So, I have 15 here. So the last 5 were kind of freebies. But what I ended up doing is I picked Death in Her Hands, which is a book I hauled earlier that I picked up at Browser's Bookshop in Olympia, Washington. I was there to kind of do a bookstore tour, and I've since heard really good things about this author. And since buying this first book, I've pretty much hauled like everything she's ever written. So I'm dying to finally read a book. So I'm going to start with this one since that was the first one that I picked first. And then earlier in the year, actually at the start of the year, I did a video where I talked about 6 authors that I'd like to read this year, and Akwaeke Emezi was one of those authors. So I'm going to read Pets, and then Bitter, which came out, I think, in February of this year, which is like I don't know if it's a sequel or a prequel to Pet, but I'm excited to get to both of these. And then lastly, I picked Beast and The Last Astronaut, which I hauled earlier this year. And, of course, I'm always going to defer and pick more horror. So this is supposed to be like a first contact sci-fi horror. And then Beast is like obviously a huge monster-y thing. And yes, that is Peter Benchley that wrote Jaws. So I know he's kind of always known for Jaws, but I'm interested to see like how his other books fare. So that is all the books that I have picked for June. So now that I have all the books picked, I go through and actually plan them in for the month. So I make it a point to read every night for at least an hour. So normally it ends up being more than an hour because once I get going, I don't really want to stop. But I plan for at least an hour. I work from home. So once I log off, I, have like a quick dinner. I don't have to worry about travel or anything like that. So my evening actually starts kind of early. I do garden and stuff, so I try to do a little something after work before reading, but my night starts pretty early, so that's also a good way for me to kind of get in more than an hour. But like I said, I do at least plan for an hour. Now, what I also put into the calendar are days when I have something special going on that might cut into that reading time. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I've got these 3 things in. Now this is stuff that's going to take like significant amount of time. There obviously I have some small things going on, but it's not enough to like really add it for me. So this is stuff that's like an hour or more that will cut into the time. So once I have that in, I then add my books. So I've already copied the 20 books from above and copied them here. And then the days to read and the number of pages per day are both formulated. So the days to read feeds off of the number of pages. And then the pages per day is calculated based off of the number of pages and the days to read. So let's put in Nosferatu as an example. So this says it automatically takes kind of the first number of whatever the page count is and says, okay, for a 600 page book, it's going to take you about 6 days to read. And so, with that number of pages at 6 days, it's going to be about 114 pages a day. Now, along with my hour to read, I know that I can typically get through 100 pages in an hour. So, doing it this way, I'm kind of maintaining my average of like 100 pages per day. And so I know at this point that's probably like an hour and 15 minutes that I'm going to spend reading. So I can, depending on how many pages per day, when I go and I'll double stack, I can kind of see like how much time I'm actually going to be spending reading based off of those pages. So one quick note about the number of pages. Most of these books, actually, in fact, all but one of these books, Wake of the Bones is an ebook, because that's from Nat Gallia, so let's just color that real quick. So I have all but one of these books, like, physically. So I will go through and pick the books off my shelves, and I look at the back of the book and look at the total page count. I don't typically use the page count off of the Goodreads page because sometimes, in fact, like 90% of the time, it's not actually accurate. Because if there's, appendices or like author note or acknowledgments and all that stuff or extra like book club material that sometimes they put in the back of the book, like all of that is included in the page count in Goodreads. So obviously I'm not going to read all that. So I will go through and physically count, with my number of pages. So I have done that. So let's go through and let me add all of the pages on here. Okay, so 2 notes. Again, Wake the Bones is a ebook. And then, like I mentioned, Black Tide is actually not out yet. So I did end up taking this page count off of Goodreads. However, when I physically get the book when it's released at the end of this month, I will replace the page count on here. So one note about the Kindle. When I'm reading on my Kindle, it tells me the percent that I'm at based off of how many pages the ebook has. And so I will actually use that percentage as kind of my halting point. And so what I do is I always put the number of pages for ebooks at 100, and then I always say it takes about 4 days to read, and then that will leave me with, it says 25, but I'm using it more like the 25% mark. Is kind of how I do that. So, and then the last thing I do is kind of just put the category in to remind myself why I'm reading. This just kind of helps me figure out what I want to try to finish earlier in the month or later in the month. Sometimes, if I'm doing like reading challenges, I'll try to do those first. Some stuff like, the horror challenges, I try to do those first. Night Galley, I try to get those kind of done out of the way. So it kind of just depends. And actually in June, we are not doing any monthly challenges, so I don't need to worry about that. I don't really think any of these are super important to get done sooner rather than later, so I don't have to worry about that. So now all that's left is to slot them in the calendar. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, I now have everything in. Okay, so let's get something else out of the way. Yes, I read more than one book at a time. Um, I know there's always a lot of questions about how do you read so much? How do you finish so many books in that month? There's only a couple ways that it's possible. One, you have to read more than one book at a time, or you finish the book in like a short number of days, or you're reading shorter paged books, right? I mean, that's really the only options. Well, I guess there's also the audiobook option. But normally, with the audiobooks, I am planning an audiobook, or I like to read the audiobook along with the physical book, and I only choose to do that. Like if the author is narrating the audiobook, I always like to check those audiobooks out. Or sometimes there's a full cast, which I like those. It kind of just depends on what the book is. Sometimes nonfiction I find a little bit dry for me, so I like to read the audiobook because then it kind of just sounds like I'm having a conversation with somebody and I feel a little more engaged with those. So again, it's kind of just personal preference on kind of how you want to do that. So I also try to make it so that it's different books that I'm kind of reading together, to kind of make sure like the plot's not the same. And quite honestly, even if they are similar, I've never had a problem with like telling them apart. Usually, when I, start that book back up again, I've kind of remembered like what happened previously. Another note, I had mentioned earlier that this is both strict and flexible. So this is especially true when it comes to this calendar. So this looks obviously really rigid, but this scheduling, there are days where like I said earlier, I don't feel like reading, or especially in the summer, a lot of shows kind of re-up their, new seasons coming out. Like I know Stranger Things 4 is coming, Umbrella Academy season 3 is coming. I do have shows that I like to watch, and so I try to balance it between reading. I love watching movies. I have a whole list of movies that I'm trying to get through this year, and of course, TV shows. So, there's days where I might not read that day, but at least I know kind of how far behind I am, you know. So if I go on the first and I'm like, you know, I just don't feel like reading today, then I'll take this and like slot it through another day, or I might bring it down here, you know, and I might have to like double stack even more. Or, you know, I get to this week and I'm like, I don't feel like reading Nosferatu this week, so I might, you know, move it down one week and bring this stuff up, right? So, I mean, it does provide some flexibility, and especially in, you know, earlier months where I wasn't trying to read exactly 20 books, you know, I might just go, I'm just not going to get through everything, and that's fine. You know, I might get to this point and I'm like, I don't feel like reading anymore this month, and then I just don't read the rest of the books, right? So, I mean, this just provides me, like a preliminary structure, right? In order to get through the 20 books that I plan to get through this month, this is kind of how I need to stack it, and I work from there, right? You know, my nail appointments are kind of a couple hours. Sometimes I get home and I'm like, I don't feel like reading, right? So then I know that I'll either need to read, you know, more than 114 pages this day, and I just maybe won't read that day, and I still need to get to this page count, right, by that day. So I'll read maybe 3 hours instead of the 2 hours that I had scheduled. So, you know, there's that. I haven't really had a problem keeping track in a while. I will say May was a little iffy. I have had a lot more days where I didn't feel like reading this month than I kind of have had this whole year. But typically, I don't like to push books into more months. I try to start and finish books within the same month. It's just an obsessive compulsive thing I have. Now, with that also being said, when I get to the bookmark thing, so I know that like this particular book is going to be, you know, I'm going to take about 3 days to read it. So I know the first day I want to get to like 110 pages. And then the second day I want to be at 220 pages before I stop. So I am also like obsessive compulsive enough that I don't like to stop in the middle of a chapter. So I will either read to the next chapter, or like in books that don't have chapters, I'll read to like the next part, or sometimes there's like a break, you know, they don't even have parts or chapters, they'll have like a little page break, like I'll try to read to that page break. So, you know, by the time I stop, it might be like 115 pages instead of 110 pages, something like that. Anthologies are a little bit different. Sometimes, you know, if there's like 9 stories, I might just choose to read 3 stories each day, regardless of what the page count is. So, I mean, there's that too. But at this point, like I have my plan in, I will print this entire thing and keep it in my bedroom. And so I will bring my books, I'll go through and pick my books off my shelf. I'll bring them in my room and say, yeah, this is my TBR. It's good. I have a bookshelf in my room. And so I'll put the books on the shelf. And then like each week I can go, okay, here's my focus for this week. And then Sunday rolls around, I go, okay, here's my focus for that week, right? And then so on and so forth. So now that I'm done with this kind of planning section, we'll go to my room, and now I get into the bookmark portion. And we'll kind of walk through how I do that. I did get a question on one of my videos about like, how do I know when to stop that one book and start another book? This is how I know. So I'll read, you know, once I get to the 110 books, I'll stop, and then I go, okay, I'm going to read my next book, right? So this is kind of what helps that too. Now, if I'm getting to, because there's been a lot of books that sometimes I've started and I'm like, oh my god, this book is so good, like, I don't want to stop reading it. That's fine. I'll just continue going, right? I mean, it just depends on how I feel in that moment, too. So, yeah, so that question about, how do I know when to stop and start, I use this as my baseline for that. So, that's that. All right, let's get to the bookmark part. Let me print this really quick, and I'll meet you in there. We are in my bedroom, and now for kind of the last part of this is the actual, like, slotting the bookmarks in. So I have my monthly calendar printed. And so what I'll do is I've got the first 3 books that I want to get through the first week. So let's go through and put the bookmark in. So Rain Shout is pretty short, and I think I planned on just like kind of starting and finishing that during the weekend, which is completely doable. So that one really doesn't need a bookmark. Let's do Unbury Carol. So according to the map, we were going to try to do 121 pages the first day. So let's get to 121 and see where that is. Alright, cool. So 121 pages is actually right at the end of the chapter, so that's perfect. Let me go through the rest of the book. It's only 3 days, so I just need to split this into 3s. So I'm going to do that right now with my bookmarks. Okay, so here's a good example. I kind of mentioned in the last part that I was doing, but I had said that, I'll get to the page count and then actually move to the end of the chapter. So this is 241, which aligns with my second day goal, but I'll get to the next chapter, which is 242 pages, but that's okay. Alright, so now we've got my 3 sections mapped out. Let's do the next one. This one is the anthology. I've got 110 pages, which ends up being right in the middle. So let's go through. Actually, I think what we might do with this one is just check out what the anthology table of contents is and see where we're at with that. So there's actually 12 stories in here, so I think I'm just gonna read like the first, I think I'll just do 4 a day. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 5th one starts at 133. Bookmark goes in. And then let's see where the next one is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 228. Ooh, Josh Mallerman. Alright. Cool, so I got those done then. So reading shout will be just trying to read the whole thing. This I've got into my 3 sections, and Dark Stars I got into this. I guess sticking way too far out for my liking. There we go. And this one's split into my 3 sections, which looks a little uneven, but that's okay because we're actually just gonna do 4 stories, so I'm sure some stories are shorter than others. You know how that goes. So that works out good. So that'll get me through the first week, and then once I do that, you know, I'll just continue on for the week. So like the next week, I'll pick those books that I plan to finish and read for that week, and I'll just continue on in that fashion. And like I said, you know, I'm kind of flexible. If I decide not to read, I still know how much I'm technically missing. So it still gives me a good idea of kind of like what my goal is for that evening, and it's a lot easier to kind of chunk it up. Yeah, sometimes I really don't feel like reading, but I'm like, well, you know, I could commit to just reading like, you know, 100 pages instead of, you know, 275 or whatever. So sometimes once I actually get into the reading, I'm happy I chose to read instead of not. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, reiterate, this probably seems like a bit much for a lot of people, but this is what makes my obsessive planning heart happy, so I will continue to feed that happiness. And, you know, even when there's a month where I'm not reading 20 books like I planned for fun this year, and I've only got 5 books, I will still plan them out and still do my goal, because, again, that's what helps me. It keeps me engaged, keeps me excited. So, yeah. Leave a comment down below and let me know if you have any obsessive planning tips and tricks that help you. I'm curious to hear how everybody does their reading for the month and their TBRs. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.